Coach Tip Tuesday. I'm your host, Jess Delpino, and this week I have a very special guest, one of our FDN course advisors, Barbara Madimenos. How are you, Barbara?
Hi, I'm good, and you?
I'm doing great. We're here to talk about your story, right?
Yeah, today we're here to talk about how I found FDN and how it's been helping me with my hormonal practice and how it could help others.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can't wait to get into this. Barbara specializes in hormonal imbalances, and if you see the text on the screen here, we're going to learn about how Barbara's hormonal issues brought her to FDN and then ultimately have been helping her to help clients, which is fantastic. I do want to mention today that we have a webinar coming up on Saturday, October 2nd, and that is going to be part of what we're offering instead of doing our FDN symposium. So if you look in the comments here, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you'll see there's a link that is fdn.today/October 2nd. I'll also put that up here on the screen. And if you go there, you can register for that webinar. Let me explain a little bit about what that is. So it's going to be 3 top experts. It's Reed Davis, our founder, Dr. Aaron Gonshore, who is the president and CEO of Fluids IQ. That is one of the lab companies that we utilize, and Sachin Patel, who's the founder of Living Proof Institute and Perfect Practice, which helps you create a 90-day roadmap to launching your signature group program without being a marketing or technical whiz. So these 3 guys are going to be fantastic, and they've got a lot of great info to show. The name of that webinar is The Health Space Unmasked. So it's going to be a little bit of an insight, and I don't want to miss that. So that is The Health Space Unmasked, and you can see the link here on the screen. It is also in the comments if you're on Facebook or YouTube, and I will put all of the information around that. So make sure you guys go ahead and click on that link, register for that webinar. You definitely don't want to miss it. 3 fantastic, amazing people in our industry, Reed Davis, Sachin Patel, and Dr. Aaron Gonshore. Yeah, it's going to be a fantastic time. So make sure you guys click on that link, register. It's in the comments. Well, let's get back to Barbara. Barbara, how are you? How have things been going with your hormones since you've kind of found FDN?
Well, I'm a lot more balanced, that's for sure. Yeah, no, it's been great. I feel like with FDN, you're working at more than just one angle, which I think is necessary in any type of healing journey. There's never, at least in my experience, never just one root cause, but there's several, because once you are susceptible to one thing, you become susceptible to many things. And it's important to look at everything around you that's happening.
Definitely. So let's go back. Let's talk a little bit about your history, right? So what happened with you? I know that you also were previously trained at IIN, so you do have a certificate of coaching with them. So what happened with you that you felt like you needed to look more for more training? Like what was going on with you that you thought, oh, it's hormonal imbalances and I don't really know how to help myself here?
So I initially went to IIN thinking that with the mindset of like food is medicine. And I still completely stand by that. I still feel like food is, or rather nutrition is a very, it's an important aspect to go towards into, helping an individual, because what we eat, how we metabolize things and whatnot does play an essential role. However, food can only go so far. And if you're not looking at the different aspects, like other different aspects, such as like heavy metal toxicity, mold, or let's say mineral imbalances, gut dysbiosis, you name it, food can only do so much. And so with IIN, it's not like we have that capability of doing any tests, and they don't necessarily teach, well, they kind of graze over it, but they don't teach it to the full extent as FDN would. So I ended up I had quite a few friends who were FDN graduates, and they were talking about it. And I was like, you got to tell me about this certificate. Like, it seems like you're helping a lot of people with it. And I got to know a bit more about the school, and I decided to join because I felt like this was this was gonna up level not just my capabilities in helping myself, but also my clients.
So what specifically really drew you in then? Is it just the foundational training? Was it access to the functional labs? Was it just being able to kind of put together a full sort of program or plan of action with somebody? Like, what, before you went through the program, what kind of drew you in?
I think what drew me in was being able to order functional labs.
Okay.
And I think it's just because in my experience with not only myself, but going to a doctor's and asking for particular labs and them telling me, well, we don't run those labs, or asking a client to go to their doctor and asking them to get particular labs and the doctor saying, well, we don't do that. Then, you know, there's only so much progress you can actually experience. But then if somebody's stopping you from continuing to progress, then where are you going to go? So I was like, okay, well, we got to take matters into our own hands. And that's what we did.
So, okay. So you go through the course, right? What are some of the big, like connections maybe that you made? Like, cause you obviously already had some training, right? Going through IIN, what complemented that when you actually went through the course that was like, oh, I didn't even think of that, or now I understand how those things might influence what's going on with me?
I think I think what I liked most about this course in particular was that they are able to connect all the bodily systems.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, can't talk today. All the systems together and explain how each system influences the other system. Because I'm sure with any other certificate, we speak of each system, whether it's the digestive system, the endocrine system, the immune system, as a system of its own. But here at FDN, we really get educated on how everything influences one another and how there's a dominoes effect. And so when I realized that my thyroid issues were connected to my other hormonal issues, and in which were connected to my digestive issues, which was then connected to my sleep issues, I was like, okay, well, this makes sense. And that's how I was able to help myself, because I was able to kind of follow the roadmap and start at the spot, or rather the point in which everything was creating the dominoes effect.
Got it. So I'd love to know if any of you guys are watching here, have you had the similar sort of things happen where you have, you know, kind of random symptoms or maybe hormonal imbalances, and you can't really figure out how one thing might be influencing another? Let us know in the comments below. Or if you guys have any other questions about hormones, Barbara's a really good resource. She's done a lot of information researching and gathering, not just for herself, but now also for clients. So feel free to leave a comment below, guys, so that we can talk about it here. Yeah, I think FDN does a really good job, right, of creating that connection and just kind of being able to see, because as FDNPs, we have a bird's eye view, right? We're able to look at everything in front of us. So it's not just about food. It's not just about rest. It's not just about exercise or supplements. It's about how are all of those things connecting to one another and influencing the body to react in such a way. And I'd even go further enough to say that the body's always trying to do something to help us, and the symptoms are just showing something is awry. And maybe just being able to understand that, you can kind of step in and influence things to go in the right direction so that it doesn't keep spiraling out of control, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you, like I tell people all the time, your symptoms are not the problem. It's really like your symptoms are just the way your body's trying to communicate to you that there is a deeper problem. And so whatever your symptom is, whether it's anxiety, whether you're missing your period, whether you have painful periods, you're losing hair, that's not the problem. We need to figure out why it's happening.
Definitely. So we got one comment. Thank you so much. FDN makes so much sense. Gut health is so important for hormonal imbalance. Yeah, I think gut health, thyroid health, all of the different systems, they're all going to influence each other, right?
100%. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on from there. So you go and get your training through FDN, right? Once you get your certification, are you then running labs on yourself? And like, what sort of insights come out of that?
So, well, when I got my certification, I personally, I found that the labs that I did during the certification was enough for me, because it gave me a starting point. I mean, and healing doesn't happen in like overnight, right? So when you're going through the course, you're still learning. The labs that you did during the course, I mean, in order to work on all of those results, I think I gave myself like a year, to at least see foundational results. And then I probably would have retested. I unfortunately did not retest. I just I wasn't able to at the time, but if I could have, I probably would have, just so I could see if what I've done has, made an effect, just, in terms of like logistics.
Yeah.
But based off of how you feel, tests aren't the only thing that you can always depend on, right? Because tests aren't always 100% either. You have to also, pay attention to your own symptoms and how you are feeling, and how you are progressing with your own healing journey as well.
Yeah. No, and I think that's really smart, is the way you feel, right? I was going to ask you that. Like, if you don't have the ability to retest, or let's say your clients don't have the ability to retest, like getting a good base to begin with, so you know where to start, and then more focusing on the feeling. Like, are these symptoms reduced? Are they going away? Have new things popped up? Are you feeling more balanced? Are you feeling less anxiety? Like, keeping track of that sort of stuff is actually really important. It's more important than the labs, I would say, sometimes, because even when you run, there's certain labs I've rerun a couple of times on me. So I've done GI map a couple of times, and one GI map has this problem that pops up, and then the second one has a completely different problem, and you can get a little bit sidetracked in trying to focus too much on what's popping up on the lab, and not really looking at the overall of what's changed with you. And so I think that you have to also keep track of those sort of feelings and like your daily life. And especially as a practitioner, I'm sure that can be really helpful with a client, right? So you have a client that comes to you with, I have so much anxiety, or I have issues with my period, and I don't know what to do. And that's why I'm coming to see you. And then 3 months, 6 months goes by, and now they're complaining about something completely different, and they've lost track of the reason they came to see you. And then you have to basically be the practitioner and say to them, well, look, let's take a step back here. You came to me with X, Y, and Z issue. Where are you with those now? And it helps somebody take a step back and go, oh, wow. Yeah, I am not even experiencing those problems anymore. So yeah, it helps with that. Which kind of leads me into my next question with you. So when you've been able to kind of transition out of, because at least this was for me, you can tell me if this was different for you, but there's a transition of going through a training like this and being able to help yourself first and make sure that you feel confident and that you get far enough ahead that you can then help somebody get to where you're at or where you're going. At what point did you start feeling confident that you're like, okay, cool, I feel good, I don't feel crazy, or like I don't have my stuff in order, so now I can actually start helping somebody else to start walking down that path? Even though you might not be exactly where you want to be, doesn't mean that where you're at isn't where somebody else wants to be, right?
Yeah, and I think it's very important, to distinguish that. Like, just, yes, you do have to help yourself first in order to help others, but it doesn't mean you have to be completely healed in order to help others. You could still be helpful. And I think that's a very important message to get across, because health is a spectrum. And yeah, in order to be completely healthy, free of any type of like issues is the goal. But, just considering, considering your particular situation, is that actually plausible for the time, restraint that you have in order, for you to help others, right? You could still be working on yourself. So as long as you have a good head on your shoulders, meaning like your mental health, you could still help yourself and other people at the same time simultaneously. It doesn't rob away your knowledge or your capacity or your helpfulness to be able to do so. And I think what kind of triggered me for me to start offering my services to other people was when I realized, okay, I think not only did I understand what was actually wrong with me, well, like how I actually ended up where I was, but I ended up seeing patterns with people that I was, working with. Because not only was I a health coach, but I was also working at a supplement store. And I was getting, people day in and day out with like the same problem, and they were complaining to me about the same things. And I would ask them about their diet, their sleep, what are they supplementing, anything, like things like that. And I just saw patterns, and I was like, okay, like obviously there's something that people are missing. And I felt like I had enough knowledge to be able to point that out and kind of usher them in the right direction.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I guess you would say like FDN really was the catalyst for you, not only personally, but for your career, right?
100%. Yeah. I feel like after FDN, not only did I gain more confidence, but I felt like I learned a lot. And I'm still going through the course sometimes, back and forth, because you can't remember everything, right? Like there's only so much my brain could hold. So yeah, there's a lot that, we are educated on in the course. And I feel like because there's just so much information, you do have to go revisit, but it does really help transcend into many different things, particularly, hormones, because hormones are just cellular messengers, right? And if your cells are not using that, if they're not sending the right message to the right tissues, then we're in big trouble.
Yeah. So I'll open it up to the audience, guys. Like if you guys have any questions about hormones, like what is it that we focus on in FDN? If you haven't gone through the training, I highly suggest that you at least book a call with one of our course advisors to talk about what it is that we do, to see if it's a really good next step for you. I'll say when I went through FDN, I was kind of a mess in a lot of different ways, like personally, health-wise, mentally, emotionally. And not that all of those things have been resolved, but I think I have a much clearer understanding of, looking at why things are happening and having a plan of action of how to address them and not get spiral out, right? Not get so overwhelmed. Plus also being able to communicate with other professionals. I think that was a huge thing for me. Going through this course gets you into a position where you're able to talk to other professionals who have been doing this longer or doing similar things. You can ask them questions, not just about yourself, but for your clients, to make sure, like, am I running the right tests? Am I offering the right suggestions? Having that professional connection going through something like this is really invaluable, because it's part of your continued education, right? Like this course is really only going to teach you the foundations of, like Barbara said, how all of the systems interact with each other, what to look out for, what sort of markers to look at on the test, how to address those with a client, how to walk them through a program that's already been laid out for you. You don't have to make it up, right? That's the beautiful thing. Like we give it to you and then you can just kind of tailor it to what works for you and your clients. But once that's done, that foundation never changes, but you can increase what you learn by talking to other people who are doing it. You don't always have to go through another training. You can literally just get a ton of information from other people who are doing this. And that's kind of where I've done my additional training so far, has just been asking questions like, what do you think about this thing? Leading me in the right direction. So I'm sure that's been really helpful for you too, because I know you already went through now 2 different trainings, and being able to kind of bounce off of other people just to see like, what do you think about this thing? Or does anybody have any insight here around this particular protocol or how this client might be reacting? And sometimes they'll even bring up questions that you didn't even think to ask a client, right?
Yeah, and we all have our own background stories on as to how we got to where we are today, right? So to hear somebody else's point of view or opinion or experience, you learn with that. We all, like you said it perfectly, we're all coming from different communities, or we've had different experiences and whatnot. And that's how you learned, by asking questions, because the more you ask, the more insight you get.
Yeah, exactly. Have any of you that are watching had any experience like this where you feel a little lost in what to do, whether it's for yourself or for your clients? Like you get somebody and you kind of feel like, oh my gosh, they have way too many problems and I don't know where to start. or even for yourself, like, yourself really well, but sometimes it can be really hard when you're in the middle of something to have that sort of bird's eye view, that perspective to really see like, oh, this might be a really terrible situation health-wise that I'm going through right now, but the last time this happened, it was way different and it was a lot worse. And so there's progression there. Sometimes it's hard for us to see. And I'd love to know from the audience, any of you guys who are watching, if you've experienced that and what kind of things maybe have helped you, whether it's going through a training or connecting with people, or, or if you're even still looking for something like that. We'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that. Or, if you guys have been dealing with hormone issues and you have questions about that, like, use us today, because Barbara has tons of knowledge and she does this all the time. It's her specialty with clients. So I'd love to know what you guys have to ask today. So I'd love to know from you, Barbara, I guess, before we get any questions that might be proposed by the audience, what are some like really good kind of key points for somebody to look at when they're dealing with hormonal imbalances for themselves or for their clients? Like, where can they really, what's something that they can maybe start with, or something that you've seen that comes up over and over again that maybe other people might miss?
So a really big thing with me is checking your heart rate and your temperature. It is probably the most basic thing that anybody could ever do. If you feel like you have cold extremities, or your heart rate is a bit slower than usual, or if you find that you get anxious a little more easily, maybe after you eat, or just on like the regular basis, to me that's an immediate sign that you're having some type of like a thyroid issue, or any type of like a blood sugar dysregulation, and that directly impacts your hormones, from cortisol, like from your cortisol response. So that is number one with me. And number two, if you menstruate, then, to look at the pattern of your cycle to see if it's light, if it's heavy, how often does it come? Do you have any symptoms when it comes? Because ideally, you don't want to have any symptoms when you get your period on a monthly basis. And I know a lot of people are like, really? Like, I should be cramping? Shouldn't I be moody? And it's like, no, technically speaking, that is what is common, but that isn't what we consider normal.
No, I like what you said. Sometimes things are common, doesn't mean that they're normal, right? Just because a symptom or something comes up and it's like, oh, it's just cramps, or it's just a stomach ache, doesn't mean that it's normal. And it actually should be something that you at least pay attention to, right? Like, you don't have to become obsessed with it, but you can at least pay attention to it. And I think tracking is a huge thing that most people don't do in normal life, right? Like, they're not tracking their heart rate or their temperature. They're not tracking like, when's the last time I had this symptom? Just even keeping a calendar, or like a little calendar book, and every time something like that is out of the norm for you comes up, and just putting it on the calendar and saying like, had a stomach ache today, had cramps that were a 9 out of 10. To be able to go back and look through that calendar too, you can start to maybe kind of find patterns for yourself or for your clients. And this is without having to do any labs or to run any tests or anything. It's just very simple, like objective understanding of how you are. I tell this to people all the time when I work with them. Like, the first place is for you to start to get a hold on who you are. And if you can then start to see where the like minute changes are, you might notice like maybe even just being around a particular person or being in a particular situation might be triggering something, and you just didn't realize it, right?
100%. Yeah, like, get those negative people out of your life. But yeah, no, you're 100% right. If you don't even have to pay attention to what you're logging, just wake up, and just write how you're feeling, or just take your temperature. Like, that was one thing that I did when I was trying to help heal my thyroid. I would wake up, immediately take my temperature, and I would go on with my day and not even think about it. And then at the end of the month, I would look at all the temperatures that I wrote in my calendar, and I would see that there was like a curve, that was happening. And I was able to kind of understand, just, was I stressed more during that week? Was I not stressed? Was I eating better? Was I not eating better? And you kind of work from there. It doesn't have to be rocket science. It doesn't have to be complicated. You just have to approach it with one step at a time.
Yeah. So any of you guys out in the audience do that? Have you ever sat there and just taken your temperature every day? Or is there anything in particular that maybe you track on a daily basis just to see? For me, I track my heart rate. I wear this band on my wrist every day. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but I just look at it and I just kind of every morning I wake up and I see like how was my heart rate at night. So I kind of have an idea, like, did it spike in the middle of the night? Because that's happened sometimes where it's like, why did my heart rate go up to 90 at 3 a.m.? I don't know. Could it be a glitch? Possibly. But I've been doing it for over a year. So I have a pretty clear understanding of like, okay, when at least this particular app shows that my resting heart rate on this app is above 65. I know that I'm obviously dealing with some form of a stress. If it gets closer to 70, it's pretty bad for me. Yeah. I've just noticed that. And so then it prompts me to, in the beginning, it used to get me in my head where I'd be like, oh my God, what's going on? And I'd like do inventory and I'd be like asking every person, I'd kind of make it worse. But now when I notice it, I'm like, okay, so either I'll sit and still do my inventory, I journal, and I make sure, like, is it a mental thing? Is it an external thing? Or, it could possibly be just a physiological thing that's happening. Like if my body's trying to expel something, then my heart rate might be a little bit high. I might not be emotionally feeling it, but it will definitely make it so that I'm a little bit on the edge, So if somebody comes up to me and says something, I know maybe today's not a good day to have that big conversation or to go and, to do something like that. So, I think having that in your mind where, like you said, just something where you can like set and forget it, right? Like you don't have to focus on it too heavily, but it gives you a clear indication to go back, whatever it may be. I think it can be really helpful for people. I haven't seen anybody comment, but if you guys are tracking anything, we'd love to know what it is, because I feel like everybody tracks something now, right? Like, so yeah, and it can be really insightful, especially if you do that with your clients. Like you can't enhance something if you don't have a baseline of what's going on. The labs do that really well because it gives you something to go back to with somebody. It shows you markers, and you can actually help with client compliance, I think, too, because they don't really see that they're getting better because sometimes it's very minute. But when they see that lab test come back and that marker's low and it was high, it might make them go, oh, okay, I guess I am doing better, right?
Yeah, and I feel like, when you give your client the tools for them to see their progress, or at least you give them a task to do in their healing, they feel like they're a lot more in control of the process of actually getting better, because it's very different. And, and I'm not saying, like doctors don't do their job, but usually when you go to a doctor, they will not give you a task to do at home per se. It's like, okay, well, here's a pill or here's a diagnosis, and you have absolutely no control over what's happening to you right now. And that's very scary and overwhelming to somebody. But if you give them a small piece of homework, or you tell them, well, this is what's going to help you feel better or be more in control over as to how you're feeling, people feel more responsible and they feel more empowered.
Definitely. So we got a comment from Kim. She asked, I have a question about low heart rate all of adult life. Thyroid checks out fine, hormones in the tank at compensatory phase. Curious where to look next. So what would you say here, without knowing anything else?
Hormones in the tank at compensatory phase. So are you saying they're all low? And I would probably look at mitochondrial blockages after that. If you're saying that your thyroid is fine, your thyroid should be between 0.5 to 2 ideally. It shouldn't necessarily be higher than that. If it is higher, there is some type of a stress occurring. But I would look at maybe blood sugar dysregulation. I would look at mitochondrial blockages, possibly mold or, any type of gut infections, or any type of mineral imbalances. Sometimes it's not necessarily the thyroid in itself, but are your cells actually responding to thyroid hormone. So that we would want to look at, are you having enough potassium intracellularly? Because potassium is what actually sensitizes thyroid hormone to, sensitizes your cells to thyroid hormone. So I don't know, I would do an HTMA probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I think HTMA that's my favorite test, by the way.
So would that help with kind of looking at some of these mitochondrial issues, the HTMA?
Yes, because I mean, your mitochondria do use up particular minerals, and I mean, your minerals are what are kind of like the sparks plugs between your cells, right? But I mean, you could run a mold test, you could run like a GI map, but to me, minerals are the foundations of everything. So I would do an HTMA.
It's great advice. And HTMA is a relatively inexpensive test also. It's just a hair sample, you put it in a thing, comes back, and it just gives you the levels. And from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's showing what's kind of expelling from the body, right? And you wouldn't want to do that more than every 3 months because of
and it's not only like just what is being expelled, but also like how are you retaining certain things, because certain minerals you have an incapability of expelling because of the energy that it requires to actually expel.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Kim wanted to know, would heavy metal toxicity and high lead be an issue or just mold? I kind of say it would be both, right?
Yeah, 100%.
From my understanding, any kind of toxicity, whether it's heavy metals or, a form of like pesticide or glyphosate or any kind of poison in the body, it is going to leave your system vulnerable to any kind of pathogen, whether that's a parasite or an infection or mold. And most of the time, from my experience, mold comes with something else.
Yes.
So, and it's not necessarily the mold that you may be reacting to, it's the mycotoxin that gets released from the mold trying to break something down that's in the system. So if you have a toxin, and let's say that toxin causes your internal bacteria to change because it's trying to deal with that toxin, then now your system and your immune system is left open. So if you do have mold that starts to overgrow, it's just created an environment for mold, then it's going to go part and parcel, right? If one's there, I wouldn't doubt that another one would be an issue. Yeah. And then, as that mold starts breaking stuff down, and as your body tries to break down the mold, it's all of the excrement. And so again, goes back to the poison and the toxicity of what's coming off the mold, not necessarily the mold, although it could be dependent on the strain, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's also your metabolic, your body's capacity to be able to expel things from the beginning. Because if your metabolism is slow, then that's when things will actually start to become dangerous, because your body won't be able to actually remove the things as it would naturally speaking.
Yeah. You're very welcome, Kim. And like what Barbara was just saying, like sometimes even doing a genetic test can be really helpful, because it can show whether or not your body has a certain SNP that might cause it to be a little bit difficult for you to detox certain things. And so you just may need some more support around that, especially if you're trying to do a cleanse or going through any of, some kind of protocol. But even just in general, you just may be more sensitive to some things like mold and mycotoxins than other people would be.
Yeah.
Yes, MTHFR is one of the SNPs that you might look for if you ran a genetic test.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. Awesome. Well, I will wait a minute and see. Does anybody else have any other questions before I let Barbara go today? She is a wealth of knowledge, and so you definitely don't want to miss out on this. But I will say, if you comment below, you will get a chance to set up a consultation with one of our course advisors, one of them being Barbara right here. And you can talk more about how the FDN course might be the next great step for you in your career, especially if you've been through another course and you've been through other training. Barbara's a really good resource for that, as is our other FDN advisor, Evan. They've both been through other courses and then came to FDN, so they can tell you kind of what it was that was different and then how they might have complemented each other, because I think IIN does stuff that we don't do, but it definitely helps to complement going further with clients, right? To be able to get access to the labs, to have more of an understanding of a roadmap and the professional connections you'll make with our community, I don't think they have as much of.
Yeah, 100%. I find that IIN focuses a lot on food, which is great. I mean, we all need to be educated on the different types of diets out there. There's a lot of coaching behind it, but I feel like FDN is a lot more of a diagnostic type of certification, which really helps us become, it's going to sound cheesy, but I mean like the best detectives we can in order to try and figure out the root cause of an actual problem.
Definitely. Well, yeah, this has been a fantastic discussion, and I appreciate all of the comments we've had today. If you didn't join us in the beginning, you want to make sure and go back and rewatch. We do have an amazing webinar coming up on October 2nd. That's on Saturday. It is called The Health Space Unmasked. It is where you'll get to see Reed Davis, our founder, Sachin Patel, and Dr. Aaron Gonshore from Fluids IQ, which is a lab we use, talking about the health space unmasked. It's great sort of information, and you definitely don't want to miss it. So make sure you go to this link that's on the screen. It is also in the comments if you are watching on Facebook or YouTube. So you guys want to sign up for that. I did see that Ashley just said, "Hi, Barbara, I'm ready to sign up. I've transferred to my PayPal." So I'm sure Barbara will get on the phone with her after this. I'm so excited to have you as part of the community, Ashley. And then Zaid, thank you for joining us again. This will be our last question. Can I ask if you know what the difference between FDN and Functional Nutrition Lab is? So that is another training program.
Functional Nutrition Lab.
Why don't you look that up? I can start to talk about FDN. So FDN, we focus on a very clear path with clients. So we have our own program called the Dress for Health Success Program. And that stands for diet, rest, exercise, stress management, and supplementation. And then we also teach the labs and lab training to interpret functional at-home lab tests. On top of that, we have our own association of professionals that you can join. And I don't believe a lot of other communities have such a robust and active community. So you have a lot of chances for further learning and more education. As far as Functional Nutrition Lab, I'm sure that they do some training. I just don't know. They may not offer the same amount of labs that we have.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
I
go ahead.
think I spoke to somebody a few months ago about this. I don't think you have access to the labs after graduation.
Got it. Yeah. So how it works with FDN is we have a program called the Medical Director Program, and that gives you full access to our entire test menu. So it's over 60 different labs that you can just go on there and order. You don't need to set it up an appointment. You don't need to go through a doctor. You just have access to order them. Whether you've been trained on that particular lab or not, doesn't matter. You still have access. And there's no subscription fee. There's nothing you have to do. The only thing would be that there are some fees depending on the lab in order for us to help process them. So you don't even have to set up accounts with lab companies. You just do it all through us. So it's a great service that we're offering. And I don't think that even if you're getting trained at some other place like Functional Nutrition Lab, I don't think they give you the same autonomy to be able to just do that. Like if you were a doctor, we're not doctors, by the way, but yeah, it just gives you that same autonomy to be able to make your own decision about what type of labs you need to run or want to run, or, you know, you don't have to purchase a certain amount every month in order to keep your ability to do that. Like we give you a lot of freedom around that. And I think that's one of the big differences that FDN, it's foundational. So we want to help you figure out, you know, what do you need, but then the sky's the limit. You can really go from anywhere from there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I hope that answered your question, Zaid. Thank you so much for joining us again. I know you were on this last week and a couple weeks ago. So thank you. And thank you for anybody else who keeps joining us every week. We really appreciate you guys leaving comments. And make sure you guys check out the comments if you're in Facebook or YouTube or on IGTV during the replay to join the webinar on October 2nd with Dr. Gonshore, Reed Davis, and Sachin Patel. And this week, we were talking with Barbara. Thank you so much again for joining me today, Barbara. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for sharing some of your story. I know it can be a little bit vulnerable, but you know, the more we share, the more we can help people, right?
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Let us know if you have any questions in the comments, and we look forward to scheduling calls with you if you're ready to join the FDN course. Okay, I will see you guys again next week. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much again, Barbara.
Bye.